Hey folks, this is another entry in our video series covering recreating popular retail store locators that we find online from big brands and recreating those in MetaLocator. Today we've chosen the Banana Republic store locator, which we will be first kind of tearing down, evaluating, and commenting on, and then rebuilding that in MetaLocator. Okay, let's start by tearing down the Banana Republic store locator a little bit. And first off, we pick these because they're good, right? They're good examples, typically very visible brands. And so some of these might come across as kind of nitpicking, which, you know, they might fall into that category. But if we were to rebuild this, these are some of the things that we would want to change. The first thing I always look at when I'm evaluating a store locator is looking at its initial presentation. What does it do before it asks me any questions? And this is actually a great example of what we like to see. That is automatically detecting the user's location. So that's definitely falling in the plus category. Looking at the results presentation in general, one of the things that we typically advocate for on every location is a bold call to action. So something like call this store, get directions, something should kind of surface as a button or a call to action within each location. They do provide action links in here, but it'd be great to surface one to the top. I commonly refer to that, or you may hear this referred to as the squint test, meaning that if you blur your eyes or take off your glasses, you should still be able to see what the website wants you to do. And right now, looking at this, what it wants us to do is filter stores by first, and then in the results, it's kind of vague. And so I think I would rework some of their calls to action that way. In that, one of the things that I don't see here is a search button. It sounds silly, but not everybody knows to like type something in and press enter. You can click on this magnifying glass, but it doesn't look like a button. Sometimes that's just an icon that lives to the right of an input. And normally I would want to replace that with a button of some kind. And I would add the store filter, which is certainly not a necessary thing. I would probably make that not as bold if I was designing this from scratch. So we're going to cover our kind of interpretations of all that, but we're also going to kind of go through the process of just rebuilding this as an exercise to help you kind of get better at creating locators in MetaLocator. So working our way down, the other thing that happens when you click on these results is you zoom in to an individual result. And actually, I really like this, but one thing that kind of bothers me is that when you do this, sometimes you want to zoom out, right? You want to return to where you were. And if I go to kind of use my scroll mouse, which is kind of my habit, it doesn't really work. So I would hope that the scroll mouse would really be able to take me back to that zoomed out location as opposed to clicking down here. So they have store hours, which is really good. They have these individual store features. I would want these linked to what they are, like this BR. It's probably a French word that I would mispronounce. I would want to know, like, link to what that really means and help me understand what that service is, because I get it's personalized styling services, but it'd be great to have some more detail there. So I'd also want to have this address clickable. It doesn't necessarily have to be underlined, but a lot of people try to click addresses. The other piece that's kind of bothersome is when I go to the store details. I go to a separate page, which is great, right? That's from an SEO standpoint. But then when I go back, it kind of loses where I was. And the back, like the details and then returning from details flow is pretty important. So overall, great locator and could use some improvement, which I'll touch on when we build this in MetaLocator. So now we're going to build this in MetaLocator, and we're going to go through the style and color selections. We'll go through the search form selections and then also the results card selections. And between all three of those, maybe a few map settings, that is basically will produce this output. We're not trying to get pixel perfect here with Banana Republic. We could dive into the CSS, but that would really be out of scope for this video. And typically when we're building an enterprise locator, we do an exercise like this, and then we might dive into the CSS and really kind of tighten up the brand styles, brand standards, and make sure that it exactly matches, their buttons, their fonts, all that thing. So what we're going to start with here is the style and color section. You'll notice that this is kind of monochromatic and black. I like that. We did that by basically turning most of these colors to black. So you'll see the primary color, the secondary color, and the text color are all black. Now, if you, for example, have like a red style and you want to change this from monochromatic black to monochromatic red, you can easily just change these colors and this template will work for you. We also went through the process of using a custom font from Google called Poppins. That happens every once in a while. There are probably 20 million fonts in the world, and there's no way that we have each one of them. So if you want to drop a custom font in, we have an article on how to do that. It's pretty easy. Google actually gives you this code. You copy and paste it, and you're off and running. So we'll drop a link in the comments of this video on how to do that. So moving down through style and color, we have chosen a 0 border radius as well. So by default, MetaLocator's buttons are a little bit rounded, and you'll notice that all of these are square. That's done by this 0 border radius. We already talked about some of these colors. We've made a couple CSS modifications, one of which is that font, most of which are pretty inconsequential, and so I'm not going to go into great detail. Just some things that we wanted to kind of tweak. But those will be included in this template if you're into reviewing those. But if you don't know what CSS is, you'll still get a really nice looking locator just like this one with maybe a couple minor differences. So that really covers the extent of the style and color settings that we made. So that's primary color, border radius, and custom font. In this part of the video, we're going to talk about how we customize the search form. They had kind of a unique search form. I can't say I loved every part of it, but for the purpose of this video, we tried to reproduce each element. Again, as kind of an educational piece, one of the things that they did was they customized the labels for the location search. So they have find a store, and the prompt is enter a location. And to do that, all you really have to do is come in and modify the label. So what I've done is I've gone to local search, expanded location, modified the label, and then I've also modified the placeholder. I'm using autocomplete here. That's a pro and higher feature, and that's the ability to basically kind of suggest what the user is typing as they type it in. That's enabled by default in pro and higher accounts. So that's it for the location piece. They have this detect location caret shown as an icon on the left. Maybe I'm old, but that doesn't look clickable to me. I like buttons to look buttony, if you will, and links to look clickable. And so this looked almost like a decoration on the left and right hand side. I've chosen to leave it off to the right as a clickable button, and that's how that shows up actually by default as a button with that little caret icon in there. And then they had that kind of icon-y search magnifying glass, and I have that as a search button. I really believe that forms should have a call to action, like a bold button, because a lot of people aren't, they're going to type in 53202 and maybe just kind of stare at the screen. That's why I included a search button. That's also included by default. The next piece they have is the ability to identify factory stores versus retail stores. I think this is a great use of category search, and it's an opportunity for me to show that we've added the category search to the search form twice. And the reason we've done that is we are using categories for a few things. One, we're using it to indicate the store type as factory or retail, but we're also using it to indicate the amenities and products that are available at these individual locations. And so amenities, shirts, and store type, these are all what are called category groups in MetaLocator. So if I go back to categories, you'll see we have this list of categories, and you can see we have blue shirts, green shirts, that are all in the shirts category group, and then we have factory store and retail store that are in the store type group. And then we have like even outlet retail location that I'm not using in this example, but we have in-store pickup, in-store shopping that are all used in the category group. If you're wondering what this user group blue pill is about, don't worry about it. It's something available to enterprise customers, and it's something that we use to help implement these demos in the same account. So it's not necessary though to do what we're doing here. So, but I have now a group of categories called store type. And if I want to create a search option that allows the user to search by those two categories alone, I can click add field and add category, which I've already done. And then in the category, I get to choose how I want it to display. I'm showing these as checkboxes. I could show them, for example, though, as a drop-down. I'll make this change briefly to show you the difference. So I'm going to have these as checkboxes simply because that's what Banana Republic did. But then I'm also going to filter this to just the category group called store type. Now, if I remove that filter, you're going to see a much longer group of checkboxes, right? Now we have our amenities, we have our products, and we have our store type. I'm going to limit that, though, in order to really reflect the same that Banana Republic was doing. There's a bunch of other options in here I'm not going to mess around with, but that's a way that we typically that we introduce a bunch of different search options in different ways. So I mentioned that I added this not once, but I added it twice. And that is in the advanced section. So Banana Republic had this filter stores by option that if you click on it, it gives you those other category groups, amenities and shirts. And so I can do that. I've added the category again. I've dragged it into the advanced container, and that allows us to introduce this advanced toggle. And that advanced toggle we can configure to show filter stores by as the language. And when you click on it, it will expand the filter stores by option, which includes everything that's in this advanced container. So right now there's only one thing in the advanced container, and that is another category control. And in this case, we're displaying them as checkboxes again, but we're showing the amenities and shirts groups. So if I click filter stores by, you only see those two lists of checkboxes as indicated by their category group membership. And so the other thing that is worth mentioning is that on the advanced toggle, we can show this either as an expand collapse option, or we can show it as a modal. A modal is a kind of web term for something that requires a decision before you proceed. So that's the example of modal, but this could also be a collapse, which is kind of like, some people call this an accordion. When you click filter stores by, it opens and closes. And so I'm going to switch that back to modal because that's what Banana Republic was doing. And that's basically how we built out the search form. The last piece I want to mention is Banana Republic had this notice. And it's kind of a cool example of something you can do in the interface builder. I added just a text field. And so if you add field and you just choose text, this is a special field that allows you to type basically anything in. Normally, like if you're doing content management, that can be done by your website. Like right above the locator, you can type in whatever you want because this is going to be on a page on your site. But if you want to introduce just some sample language, you can include that in a text input, as you can see that kind of garbage that I added there. And that would allow you to type anything you want. You notice that the text that I added actually has an alert around it, like that blue background. That's from this alert primary style. That's an example of me applying a Bootstrap class directly to the styles dropdown. If you don't know what that means, it's okay. Bootstrap is the CSS framework that we use for all of these. And you can specify a Bootstrap class directly in that dropdown. And that really covers the search form. I think it's a nice search form. It's pretty compact. It does what it's supposed to do. If we were to offer this as a template, we'd probably delete this little text thing from it. But I just wanted to show you exactly how that was done if you ever need to take advantage of that sort of thing. So that's what we did on the search form. Thanks so much for hanging with me. Now we're at the results card configuration. The results card in this case is pretty cool. It's relatively feature rich, and you might even say a little busy. I just want to mention again that there is no bold call to action in this, and if there was a something that MetaLocator preaches a lot, it's having one big button per result so that you really drive people's attention. I can understand, though, in a retail context, sometimes you want them to pick whatever they want to pick. So, but in this video, we are going to be talking about the results card and all the pieces that we added here. So I'm just going to work from the first element down. The first one is the title. The only thing I really did with this is I added the uppercase text style. That was something we took from the Banana Republic Locator. Every time their store was their store name was in uppercase, and so that's okay. The next piece, though, is the category list. We talked about this in the search form, but in case you jumped ahead, we have the ability to display one group of categories here in order to display different categories in different places. So I want to highlight the category list that shows the products, but then also move down and highlight the category list that shows the amenities. So these are all categories, but we are using the category groups to control which categories are showing up in which way and in which place. So if we go over to the list of categories, we can see that in-store pickup, in-store shopping, these are both amenities, and that the shirts are all in the shirts group. And so if I go back to the interface builder, you can see that in the category list, I can expand that, and you can see that I've filtered this to only show shirts categories, and that's basically how that works. So I can add the category list field to the results card as many times as I want in order to display different types of categories in different places. The next piece I've added is the review summary. This is not something that the Banana Republic store locator had, but I thought it was kind of cool to include and demonstrate as a MetaLocator feature. The review summary is kind of what it sounds like. It's a summary of all the reviews that we have obtained for this particular location, and it's represented in this case in a total score as stars, which your people are typically familiar with seeing, but then also the number of reviews that represent those stars. And so if you don't know anything about MetaLocator reviews, excuse me, there's articles about that, but there's also the ability to bulk manage reviews in this in MetaLocator itself, and we can also capture reviews for you. So we'll cover that in another video, and probably there already is another video about that. So those are reviews and one example where we deviated from the Banana Republic example. So we've got full address here. I followed their example and I didn't link to the directions. And then the next one is the phone number. In this case, what I've done is I've used our click to reveal. You might be wondering why this phone number looks really short and has like a ... at the end. This is a cool way of tracking how many phone calls you get without paying for extensive or expensive phone call tracking systems. If you click this, it shows you the full phone number, and then an analytics event is tracked in MetaLocator, and that's called click to view. And the way that you enable that is just by going under phone. You have a few ways to display phone, right? We can display it as the regular phone number. We can display it in this way as click to view, or we can display it as a link for click to call, or we can display it with as an SMS text message, where when some people click it, they will begin a text message dialogue on their phone. So that's how we did the phone number in this example. And then finally, the list of categories. I won't belabor this too much. Again, we're showing the amenities group only, and we're using the tag list template, which shows the little icons which are shown there. And then finally, the hours. Their hours matched our hours collapse template very closely. So when you click on this, it expands and contracts. So if I click on this, it expands and contracts. Ours has a little bit more information, and this changes based on the time of day. So earlier today when I was looking at this, it said closing soon. And so we basically followed what Google does here. Closed opens next at 10 a.m. Closing soon occurs within an hour. And then open shows the current hours for the day. So that is ultimately the list. And then the next piece, or excuse me, the hours. The next piece is the result number. We've covered this in a couple other videos, but basically it's we're specifying the result number and we're displaying it inside of this little icon. It's the font awesome. That's where FA comes from, map marker icon. If you wanted to pick a different icon, some of these work better or worse for holding a number, right? If you put the 1 on top of an angry face, it's probably not going to look very good. So that's how we treated the result number. And then just below that is the distance. I'll expand that. Typically distance is pretty wordy. It says like approximately X number of miles away from your location. This little guy, this is called a sprintf format. That's like the word print with the S at the front and F at the back. So sprintf is a kind of common syntax of how to write strings. And so what this says is we want 1 decimal point after F is a floating point number. So I could actually change this to 2 and we would end up with 2 digits after the decimal. And then the letters M and I are going to appear just after the distance. So that's where the MI comes from. So I don't think anybody cares if it's 7.28. And so you'll see that go back to 0.3, which is 0.28 rounded up. So that's distance. Just a note on these containers. These cards all have a standard container sidebar right. You can imagine the center row, the middle row of this results card has sidebar left, body, and then sidebar right. And then inside the body, there's also another container called address that you can use. There's no rules for these. Sidebar left is on the left, sidebar right is on the right, and then the body is where we typically put everything else. And then we have directions and then links to details. In this case, the details actually goes to our kind of standard details pane. A lot of this repeats what's on the results card. So that ultimately covers everything that's in the list. Okay, this is the last segment in this video of recreating the Banana Republic store locator. Just a couple other things to talk about. One is on the map settings. We've done numbered markers here. That wasn't in the Banana Republic store locator. I just was kind of liking the layout. And the way that I did that was under map settings, the dynamic icon field, we chose result number. And then we made sure that this is what was specified under the marker icon. If you pick, not all marker icons make good icons to have a result number inside them. Like the angry face icon has basically negative space in it, which makes these really hard to read. So you want to pick something that's solid. The other one that's really good is FA-circle, which gives you kind of a nice round circle. But it should be something solid, not something with a lot of kind of visual busyness. And so that's the only change we made to the map. But the other piece that I mentioned was that when you click on these individual results, you jump straight to, the marker. You zoom into it. You jump on the map and you go straight to it. That's an option in MetaLocator. It's under behavior. And it's called result click. The default is open the marker window, and I'll show you what that looks like. So the default is, okay, we see 5 markers. You click on the result. The marker window opens, or open marker window occurs. But we can also add an additional event, a behavior that occurs when the result click occurs, and that's zoom to marker. And that's what you're seeing on the Banana Republic locator. So when I click this guy, notice I zoomed into the marker. I'm personally not a huge fan of this because I start to lose context regarding where the other markers are. I mean, I get it, but there's no real back button in that case. But if you want this type of behavior, that's exactly where that is. So that is basically a good summary of all the changes to the settings that we made in order to build this store locator and make it look exactly or as close to the Banana Republic store locator as we could. This went a little bit longer than I thought, but it was a really interesting locator to rebuild if locators are your thing, and those are my thing. And so feel free to drop any comments if you can't exactly reproduce any of this stuff. We'll be happy to help you through it. Thanks.